And we're live. Welcome to Personality Quest. Joel Mark Witt here with Antonia Dodge. We're coming to you from Orlando, Florida right now. We're just about to start our 5-day live profiler training event and had a little bit of tech challenge getting started with the stream this morning, but we're finally here with everybody. So welcome to Personality Quest. If this is our first time with us, what we're going to be doing in just a few minutes at the top of the hour is we're going to be watching the Personality Hacker podcast together. We're talking about the 4 styles of feeling functions today. Now, there's only 2 feeling functions, the cognitive functions that Jung talks about. Extroverted feeling, we've nicknamed it harmony. An introverted feeling, we've nicknamed that authenticity. But there are 2 expressions of each of those functions. And we're going to talk about that today on the podcast. We're going to talk about more of an assertive or analytic expression of that function, or more of a lean back receptive version of that function. Dr. Dario Nardi has done some work around this with brain scans and EEG machines, brain imaging, and it's based on some of the work from Dr. Helen Fisher, who also has worked with neurotransmitters. So we're excited to bring this episode to you today at the Personality Hacker Quest call.
Okay, but we have to like calm our energies down because we don't have our whole team with us.
That's right.
Our team is in transit. Almost every single one is in transit coming to Orlando, Florida for our profiler training event. And that means that we're flying solo. So that means that Joel is completely in charge of the tech, which has a tendency to freak him out a little bit.
Yeah, it's okay though.
especially if he hasn't done it before. Yeah.
Well, I've been really working on this whole, delegate to people, set up systems. Don't worry about the details as much. And that works great, except when you happen to have a scheduling conflict and you accidentally book all the flights for your team to come in at the same time you need people to help you do the back-end operations and delegate it. So this morning I was quickly trying to figure out how to live stream. It's not terribly technical, but I had to figure out the live stream this morning quickly on the fly. Yeah. I'm a little frazzled from it, right?
All right.
Can definitely do that.
That's it. Are you looking forward to the event this week?
I am. I think we're going to have a really great group of students coming in. I think it's a little over 50, almost 60 people are going to be descending upon Orlando.
It's a big group.
In the next few days. Yeah. And we're going to be going through, basically, this is the completion of a 6-month course that people have been part of, right? They started this process all the way back in the early part of the summer. And they've been studying how to do what's called conversational profiling. So in personality type, we teach people through this process of profiler training how to sit down with another person, have a psyche to psyche, human to human conversation, and help someone arrive at their best fit personality type. This can be really powerful because how many times have you sat down with somebody that's just had an interest in you at all, just tuned into you and asked you questions about yourself? Well, if you have a methodology that also helps you ask questions to somebody, man, people feel really seen when you have this skill to bring to folks. So we're really excited that people are coming down to learn the skill. We also have some advanced students and some coaching students that are coming as well for some of our advanced classes. And I think there's just nothing that can replace coming together live in person with a group of like minds, people that, love personality types and they love people and no matter what type they are. We have intuitive thinkers, hardcore, like INTPs that come to our events. And you think, well, they're not really interested in sitting down having a conversation with people. They absolutely are, because this gives them a methodology to actually see people as a puzzle, to unlock them, to understand where they're coming from. So all different types, you don't have to just be a feeler judger to be interested in something like this. All types can benefit, I think, from having a skill like this, especially as our world gets more and more digital and we need to bring the human to everything. I think the art of conversation is so powerful, especially if you have the framework of personality types.
Yeah, so. Actually, I'm missing my bantering buddies. I'm missing Christian, my INTP Christian banter buddy, because you don't banter with me.
Yeah,
you're too serious.
Well, banter always throws me off. I forget what I'm doing.
Like, no banter. I have to focus.
I can't keep trying the clock when there's banter.
So, we've talked about this before, and I think actually feelers enjoy the system and learning the profiling methodology because it gives them it gives them the math behind what they've already kind of been suspecting.
Yeah.
So it gives them language and math. But for the thinkers, it turns people into a far more interesting puzzle. And I was talking to an NF about this, an ENFP, and I could tell that she was kind of put off by the idea that one would use like the concept of profiling or like having conversations with people to find them more interesting, and almost as if you're supposed to find people intrinsically interesting. But that's just not how thinkers roll. People are not necessarily intrinsically interesting, but once you're working out the puzzle of what their best fit type is and their cognitive functions, all of a sudden they become fascinating. So even the most boring conversation becomes like an interesting conversation because now you're trying to solve a puzzle. And she was like, well, shouldn't you just find the humanity of a person interesting? And it's like, kind of, sort of. But the thing is that because thinker types have a tendency to not just be focused on the human story, they're more focused on sort of the sort of the math of the interaction. Like what, like, is this in conversation giving me more information? Is it helping me in any way? And so I mentioned that the reason why profiling in part was so powerful for me was I was able to see every person as a puzzle. And so everything they said became more interesting. So I was actually listening to them as opposed to kind of sort of dismissing them and trying to figure out how I can escape this terribly boring conversation. And so I said, even though to somebody who maybe has an introverted feeling, that sounds like a horrific, statement that like people only become interesting when they're puzzles. I'm like, but at least they became interesting. And then I was able to get the story. Then I was able to find out how fascinating this person was, because my first port of call was not to find whatever this like small talk, sort of like the whatever's interesting to that person. It wasn't always interesting to me. And then when I discovered, or when I was able to see people as an interesting puzzle in and of themselves, suddenly their interest did become more interesting. So I think to feelers, it helps them with the math of it. And I think for thinkers, it gives them an on-ramp to find everybody interesting. Which I don't know, maybe you're a thinker type and you're like, I don't understand what you're saying. I find all humans intrinsically interesting, which I don't think is going to be the case for most thinkers, but I don't know. maybe there's one out there that's like, no. People are just this kaleidoscope of fascination just because they exist.
Yeah.
I don't think most thinkers think that. But then they do become interesting once you're figuring them out. And then you can hear their stories. And now all of a sudden they do become, at the end of the process, all of a sudden they do become like humanized. So the process helps humanize for thinkers, and the process gives math for feelers.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's my little spiel.
I like the spiel.
Okay.
That's good.
All right.
If you're just joining us, by the way, we're right in the middle of our Personality Quest Club. We're going to be watching the Personality Podcast today, talking about the 4 flavors or styles of the feeling cognitive functions. And then right after, we're going to talk about it. We're going to have some breakout rooms, some journal prompts, and we're going to give everybody that's here part of the Quest Club membership a quest challenge this week to go out and test yourself in the world. Not like hard, something really difficult, but just go see your relationship maybe to some of the feeling functions this week. We want to talk about that and give you some challenge. And then next week, by the way, we're still going to be here on site. We're going to be finishing up our 5 days in Orlando, and Dr. Dario Nardi is going to be joining us live on the stage just for Quest Club members. We'll start the live feed and talk to everybody on YouTube maybe for a minute or two, but then we'll go into the private Quest Club membership event. It's an online virtual event for members only, where Dario is going to go through a breath work that can shift us into the 4 different subtypes of our personality, actually using breath techniques. He's going to guide us through that live in a session that we're all going to be able to tune into live next week on the 19th of November. So I'm excited for that too. Mm-hmm. Also, if you're watching, and we're going to broadcast this because we're all gathered here in Zoom, that's what we're broadcasting from on the live stream, but I'm not totally certain that the stream is going to be strong enough. I think it'll work because we're using Wi-Fi that's out of our studio. So as an Enneagram 6 who likes to have backups and redundancies, I'm also premiering the episode at the top of the hour on YouTube separately. So if the stream for some reason gets wonky, you don't have a way to watch it, it gets kind of laggy, you can just flip over to the main premiere over on the YouTube channel. I thought that would be a good backup for people to be able to watch the stream today.
Yep.
So that's cool.
All right. So you've got redundancies.
I do.
Yeah. You've woven them into the system.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I learned my lesson.
Yeah. I like your nervous Enneagram 6-ishness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's actually served us well. I mean, sometimes it's just a little too anxiety producing, but most of the time it's like that worked out because you had redundancies.
I suppose.
And I'm not thinking about this.
It's the one time I don't have redundancy that everything goes wrong. I've noticed. So just having them in place makes it that stuff doesn't go wrong. Because the one time you don't, it's like, oh man, the very one time I thought I could get away with it. But you can't. You can't get away with anything. Yeah. All right. Well, I think it's about time to go to the episode for this week, talking about the 4 feeling functions. We'll be back right after this.
Okay. So basically what I heard you say though, is just in case, if for some reason the intranet that we paid for to get the higher version, the much more strong signal version.
Yes.
If for some reason that is not
wobbles
enough, because that is the case sometimes, even though they're like, no, this is our premium. It's like, is it premium? If it gets a little wonky and wobbly, then we might have to head over to the live stream.
Yes, I'll put the link in the chat for all the Zoom, all the Quest Club members can go over there. People that are our guests today can go over there and check that out.
Yes, and by the way, I mean, I don't know how smart it was to have a bunch of guests on the one time that we are running it all on our own from a hotel room. I'm not sure if that was the smartest idea, but we did that. But if for some reason, by the way, and I just want to welcome everybody. Who's
welcome. We're glad you're here.
We're glad you're here. We're kind of out of sorts because we're figuring this all out by ourselves, and we usually produce, but we just want to give a thank you and a warm welcome to everybody who's in the Quest Club right now that's trying it out.
Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this episode. We'll see you then.
I have a specific example in mind I'm not going to share. That's why I kind of I started to go down a road. I went, actually, I'm not going to share that. I'm going to divert this. I'm going to use my own extroverted feeling harmony and realize, no, that's probably going to land poorly and go down a different road. So that's kind of why I was like, it looked like I was setting up for something. I'm like, no, I'm abandoning ship. Go this way. Never mind.
Fair enough. But I will give a good example in my opinion.
Harmony people terrify me. That's why, because I feel like they're going to come after me. Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So this week on the show, we are concluding a short 4-part series looking at all 8 of the Jungian cognitive functions and examining the energies and expression of each of them, whether that's an analytic or assertive energy or a holistic or receptive energy. So that's a lot of words I just used. We'll unpack that step by step here. Just so you know, if you're a brand new listener, you're maybe don't know a lot about type, or you're a new listener, you need some orientation. If you go over to personalityhacker.com, our website, and you look up something called the CAR model, it's going to be very helpful in some of the things we're going to talk about today, because it's a metaphor for how personality types are expressed cognitively. So it shows you the mental wiring of the mind. Each personality type has a different CAR model they use, but the CAR model explanation will show you the framework that we use. And then you can apply that specifically to your Myers-Briggs personality type, or what some people call 16 personalities. And so I just wanted to reference that material to help you orientate to today, because we have a lot of preamble to lay the tracks for what we want to talk about today, because it's a little bit more advanced. If you're newer, this is some deeper material, and we want to bring it out to everyone and get deep with it. The other thing you can also do is you can join our Personality Quest program. It's a membership unlike any other you've been a part of, where we come together once a week live in a dynamic format. We go through the material of the podcast, but then right afterward, we go into breakout rooms, we do some journaling, and we do some group discussion to unpack the learning of these episodes and some of the things we talk about. And then we give everybody a challenge for the week to go try in their real life. So they come back with a real world experience, making personality type come alive for them. So those are 2 levers, the CAR model and also Quest, you might want to be a part of, that will really help you gain insight into some of the material I want to talk about today. So Antonia, let's jump into the content now that I've done some of the preamble. Lead us through how we're going to approach this.
All right, so for the last 3 weeks, we've talked about analytic versus holistic character traits. And they have just whether or not you have a preference for more analytic or a preference for more holistic energy, those come with certain character traits all by themselves. And then we've been taking that and marrying it with each, as you mentioned, each of the 8 Jungian cognitive functions, or the mental processes that are the building blocks of the Myers-Briggs system. We've been watching what happens when we, or observing that, how that energy, the analytic or holistic energy, flavors the function. We did it in the first episode with the sensing functions. Then we, in the second episode, did the intuitive functions. In the third episode, we did the thinking functions. And now we're going to complete it with the feeling functions. And just to, in case you haven't been following along with us, in case this is the first of the series that you are tuned into, I want to do like a quick compare contrast between analytic and holistic, just so that we get a sense of what those traits are. And it makes more sense why they flavor the functions in the way that they do. And I will, one more little bit of preamble. I will say too that it's really important to understand this concept. It's been built on the work of our friend and colleague, Dr. Dario Nardi. He is, I would recommend getting the book that this content is based off of. He's just released it on Amazon and on Radiance House, publishing platform Radiance House. It's called Decode Your Personality, 64 Brain-Based Subtypes to Go Beyond Myers-Briggs. Yeah. And the reason why this work is so good and so refreshing is I think it really helps with mistypes and incomplete definitions of functions that almost all of us have.
Yeah.
And I think marrying these energies with functions and seeing a wider spectrum of how they can show up and a bigger territory that each of these functions takes in helps with things like not just mistypes, but also what are the real gifts that each of these functions have? Like, what are the lessons they have to teach us? And then in our own personality, for our particularly our favorite functions, our driver and co-pilot in the car model, or our first or second, or dominant auxiliary, whatever vernacular you use, how can we make sure that they're not overly weighted or imbalanced toward one side or the other, creating one-sidedness? So I think it's a important concept, and I'm very happy that we've been presenting it.
And I just want to mention that Dario doesn't just draw on his own work. He also leans into Dr. Viktor Glenko, works with socionics in Europe. He came up with the nicknames for what we call subtypes. Dr. Helen Fisher for neurotransmitters and hormones. And then Dario's own work in EEG brain scans or brain images. He's noticed patterns of different, brain patterns basically that speak to some of these energies, analytic or holistic. We can actually see that on the brain scans. So there's some research and material to back up some of the things that we're asserting on this show. It's not just out of thin air. There's some real world tangibility to it.
No, we're making it up as we go. No, you're right. It's brain savvy science. Okay. So let's go through that compare contrast with analytic and holistic, and then get into the content of the feeling.
So this is just in a general sense. This isn't applied to any functions at first.
Right.
Okay. So as you're listening along, just in general, your entire system of you as a person, void of personality type, do you have more of an assertive, directed, focused energy in the world? Or do you have more of a holistic, diffused, receptive energy in the world? And we're going to talk about the qualitative nature of each of these.
All right. Okay. So the analytic style is the former of what you just described. It's the more goal-focused, more driven, confident, has a sense of clarity about outcome. It's more top-down in situations. The top-down approach starts with the solution and looks for the problem. It is it's more visual. It prefers speed to some extent. It's more of a literal thinker and tuned into word content and facts. And it's more comfortable working in hierarchy. Holistic approach is the opposite of that. It's more open-ended. It's looking for input. It tends to be patient and curious, but not necessarily driven and focused. It tends to be a little bit more open to what we call information in the peripheral, which means that by definition, it's less laser target focused. It's more open to information that's kind of floating around. It considers all aspects of a situation at once. It's more about novel solutions than specific ones. It tends to have a bottom-up approach, more tuned into the figurative as opposed to the literal, and it's more egalitarian, right? And it doesn't like hierarchies as much. So obviously the analytic style is going to be seen in like business, engineering, government, law, military, science, technology, whereas the holistic style is going to be more like the arts, social services, the humanities, that kind of thing. So those are the analytic and holistic preferences, and now we're going to pair them up with the feeling functions.
Yeah. So there's two feeling functions. There's extroverted feeling. We've nicknamed harmony. This is focused on the energy between humans, the needs of humans, the interaction, the way humans treat each other, and the emotions that live out here in the outer space. But there's also introverted feeling. We're going to talk about this too. We nicknamed it authenticity. It's about the core values, the inner identity, resonant, the motivational structures that we all have. And so these two feeling processes, all of us access. Some of us have as a strength. So introverted feeling or authenticity is a preferred function for FPs in the Myers-Briggs system. And extroverted feeling or harmony is the preferred function for FJs in the Myers-Briggs system.
Okay.
But all of us access this energy. All of us have part of this in us. We all have to interact with other people and know our identity and our motivations and things of this nature. It's just what sophistication do we have with it? What certainty do we have with it? And so that's really where you may not be aware of that energy as much as somebody else, but we all have access to them and we're all using them all the time.
Yeah. And as we mentioned in the last podcast on the thinking function, these are judging functions.
Oh, yeah.
Or decision making.
It's where the fights happen, right?
Yeah.
The should statements of the world.
That's right.
Or evaluative criteria.
Our should statements of the world, of the world. It's like how should things be lined up? Well, these are the functions that tell us. And the feeling functions are going to be more values-based as a general rule. So starting with extroverted feeling. So as you mentioned, extroverted feeling is about understanding emotions outside of us because we use them for information, to read content from others to let us know how they're doing. I would say that the core of this function, on its most simple terms, is rapport. Right. It's the experiencing energy from other people and then cycling it out and then putting your energy out and then receiving and then giving and receiving and giving energies. And so that is effectively rapport. Right. And when you're in rapport, then you get tuned into whether or not everybody's okay and what needs are going unmet and if everybody's in a good place and in good simpatico. And it's just kind of making sure everybody's all right all the time. And so there's two different styles of being tuned into that. The first one is the analytic style of extroverted feeling. Now, this is really interesting because I think people who have a more analytic version of extroverted feeling or harmony oftentimes think they're thinkers, right? It's very common. And Dario calls them the shepherds. That's what, or at least this function, analytic, is the shepherd function. So just like we've mentioned before, analytic means it's focused, it's goal-oriented, it's more assertive, and that holds true with extroverted feeling or harmony as well. It's about voicing society's values, right? It's shepherding people to ensure that the values that the person using this function have determined are important, shepherding others to ensure everybody's on board with those values. Now, they might do it in a very diplomatic way. They might say things like, hey, we should probably talk and get this worked out. But at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is corral everybody to ensure that important interactions and values between people and in culture and society, that nobody's being too much of a renegade against them.
Well, nobody's draining the system, right? No one's pulling on the group more than their share.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so it's important to corral outliers, right?
Yeah.
It's like, who's not paying attention to these important values? Those are the people we have to get on board. And there's a sense that if we can all just get on board with these values, we can just solve all the problems. and it can go big, right? Because it's analytic, and analytic tends to be more goal-oriented and more assertive. Then it goes from smaller interactions into sometimes into whole societal thinking, right? Everybody needs to get on board with this value, because if not, I mean, like maybe a couple people can be outliers, but let's make sure that they understand that they're not cooperating with the system and society and culture. And so because of that, there's going to be consequences.
Yeah. Well, and they're not wrong. I mean, look at what this has done for societies. We have manners and certain behavioral expectations that actually has made our world better. Imagine, living during Roman times when you could be on a road somewhere and get killed, or there's all these other, there's like social expectations that keep us safe outside of just like legalities and law enforcement, right? We kind of just expect that humans will treat us a certain way. And so I think if there is enough consensus, you can change culture to have different expectations, different outcomes.
Yep.
They're right in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially since the fundamental goal is to do it for one's own and everybody else's good, right? There's a real desire to create win-wins, and there's a desire to see people healed and make sure everybody's doing okay, and make sure that, like the system isn't sick. I think that's ultimately what analytic extroverted feeling or harmony is attempting to do. The challenge is that not everybody agrees on those values. And so if a person has this, the analytic version of this in a one-sided way, in an attempt to help, they might actually become a bully, right? In an attempt to make it better for everybody, they might end up, actually having some acceptable losses, right? And in part, they're willing to do big sacrifices for this greater good. So you're going to have to do big sacrifices too, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not you agree with their assertions.
There's a great part in the show, The Good Place. I don't know which episode or season it is, but they talk about we change, because they're talking about how to be a good person or bad person or whatever. They're like, change behavior first and people's hearts will follow. And I feel like that's such a shepherd, extroverted feeling, harmony viewpoint, is like, get right action, get consensus, get everybody moving the right direction. And then people will learn to like it. Their hearts will follow later, right?
Right. Yep.
The other thing this could also show up at is something like an arranged marriage. Like, we're going to construct something that makes sense. Yeah, maybe you don't feel like you love that person now, but go ahead and arrange it. You're going to learn to love them later over time, right? Because we're going to force this, we're going to make this thing happen. And then you're going to accommodate your own internal sense. Your heart will match the external framework later.
Yeah.
But let's get the framework going first and then let your heart catch up.
Yeah. And that's a hard concept for Westerners at this point to really consider, because we haven't done that for so long.
Yeah.
That was the standard social contract for most cultures around the world for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it's only in recent times that we're not doing that. And a part of it is because it's, to some extent kind of makes sense and is good for everybody. And we make sacrifices as individuals for the greater good. And so I agree with you. I think that that kind of arrangement does feel very shepherd, extroverted feeling or harmony.
Yep.
Daria mentions that they can be really inspiring orators, and in an organization, they're going to help everybody be aware of the organization's values and get in sync as best they can. A church pastor is an obvious example, but the extreme is cult-like, right? So that's when it goes bad, is when we're getting people a little too on board, even against their better judgment. Mostly they're inspiring, advising, corralling, and shepherding. But there's going to be some black sheep around who don't want to be brought into the pen. And this is where maturity versus one-sidedness comes in. So again, that bullying can come from the one-sided version of this. And we talk a lot about how extroverted feeling or harmony is about getting people's needs met. And I remember somebody taking some exception to that. I think the person had ENFJ preferences and they didn't really resonate with that description. And they probably actually have shepherd. I mean, I would suspect that if they have ENFJ preferences and they don't really resonate with that piece, that they probably have the shepherd version or the analytic version of extroverted feeling or harmony. But I see it as a lot of times the analytic versions are like the writ large versions.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is about getting people's needs met. It's just not doing it on an individual tuning into one-to-one person element. It's more like all people's needs. And that's really what culture's about. Culture and society, to some extent, it's not the only thing it's about. But one of the things it's about is making sure that we all as a society and collective, if at all possible, are mostly okay in getting our needs met. And so I think the shepherd version of this still thinks in those terms, but does it on to scale, right?
You can't spell culture without cult.
Yeah, right.
And it speaks to that. You mentioned cult leader at the worst extreme example of this. And so I think that's the one-sided piece is, that buy-in, that consensus buy-in. It's almost a cult-like nature culture has. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that rubs me the wrong way, but I understand it. I know it's needed in a lot of ways in society. I am one of those black sheep that they're trying to corral often and bring into the fold that doesn't like to play well, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and again, maturity comes in here. If it's one-sided without maturity, if it has no, and we'll talk about holistic extroverted feeling in a moment. But if, the goal, and sometimes people go, well, I think I have both sides. Can I have both? And it's like, yeah, you want both. You actually want both the analytic and the holistic. As we've mentioned in the previous podcast, the goal is to have a really beautiful balance of the two, because the balancing act is where the magic happens. Mm-hmm. If you're too one-sided, too analytic, or too holistic, and you don't have enough of the other side, usually that's a sign of a lack of maturity, and it does rub people the wrong way. Even if you're extremely diplomatic about it, even if you're super nice about it, it doesn't matter. It will still rub people the wrong way, because at the end of the day, you're saying you need to sacrifice your individualism in behalf of what I believe is the greater good. And it's like, well, who are you?
Yeah.
Why do you get to decide that? And I think the maturity comes into play, and we'll talk about the holistic version, but the maturity comes into play in not being so aggressive about one's own assumptions of values.
I think the other way this can go too, though, is, you know, we talked about in the very first episode, this idea of top down. I mean, we've talked about it every episode, but I said it's like you have a hammer and all the world's a nail. I think top down for a shepherd, extroverted feeling, or harmony person, or this energy in the function, maybe the person's not the thing, but it's the function, is, you know, that writ large idea you said, it's not even getting needs met. It's signaling that we're the type of people that would get needs met if there was a need here.
Right.
There's a lot of signaling going on that's like in an abstraction, because it's not about the actual people that's the need. It's like setting the framework. And so we signal back and forth that that's the type of people we are. And I need you to signal it to me. And it actually isn't solving anything. It's just it's ensuring that at the top level, the highest level, top down, we're sending a message that this is how we're supposed to behave. And we all need to signal this together. And I think a lot of people are confused on what's going on there. But I think that's that analytic push, extroverted feeling or harmony, to say, you know, you need that marker to show that you're a safe person. You're in the group with everybody else. And I think that's what's often, I would say for people outside, it's very confusing.
Yeah, I would agree. And tag that. I just tagged it because I think after we talk about the holistic version, you can see how a merging of the two will help solve that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's an underlying assumption that if everyone joins arms in mutual agreement, consideration, and cooperation, aligning and honoring values and behavior, then any and all problems can be solved. That's the underlying assumption of the shepherd extroverted feeling or harmony energy. And I think a lot would be solved, but not everything, right? And so there's a willingness, though, to make sacrifices, big sacrifices. But there's also an expectation everybody's going to make big sacrifices. So the beautiful things that come along with the analytic version is increased leadership. Again, a lot of times people who have the analytic version of this function think that they're TJ types. I think that's very common. It's diplomacy, it's articulation, it's leadership, it's a shepherding capacity, it's corralling, it's teaching good lessons, right? There's a lot of positive stuff that comes along with it. But there's also some assumptive thinking. There can be some bullying, right? Whether intentional or unintentional. And so it needs to be balanced with another energy.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that other energy. So the holistic extroverted feeling or harmony, Dario calls the host.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's basically like being a host for the world all the time to some extent. This is really the side of the function that is looking for and scanning for unmet needs, trying to get those needs met, like a host would.
Personal needs.
You got it. Exactly. And the sacrifices don't tend to be the big sacrifices like the analytic. It tends to be a lot of little sacrifices all the time, right? So it's like moment to moment, the willingness to make little sacrifices in behalf of the context or the environment or the people one loves. It's like being a host, right? All the time.
And I think this shows up a lot for FJs, people that use this as a preferred function, in the phrase, okay, I don't agree with what's going on, but I'll just have this say in my heart. Like that's like a very tangible way it might show up for you if this is more your style.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the receptive extroverted feeling or harmony that is very empathic, right? Because you're receiving that information, you're receiving the emotional information that you're reading off of others, as opposed to the analytic that rolls up their sleeves and gets to work then on making it so everybody's okay, right? Or at least wanting to do that, wanting to shepherd and corral everybody to make sure everything's okay. This is a receptive energy, so it tends to be more sensitive to other people's feelings. And because of that, they can be, that can show up as getting one's feelings hurt easily, but it can also show up as like not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to offend anybody, always making sure that the things you say are like the kind thing to say. And so it can lack directness. I mean, it's the receptive version, right? So it's going to lack that assertion. It's maybe going to have a hard time speaking up for itself, and maybe take a lot of hits that it didn't need to, right? The willingness to make lots of sacrifices, along with the inability to communicate and articulate when that's happening, out of fear of being insensitive, can make it so that the holistic version can take a lot of arrows.
And so how this would look for you, if this is your preferred function again, is, man, I'm doing all this emotional labor for everybody. No one's looking out for me.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even seeing the value I'm adding between the cracks. And it's so emotional. It's so heavy of a lift. Why am I not getting recognized for this? In fact, I'm getting used, and I feel resentful, and I feel upset. And I don't like the fact that I'm not able to have a reciprocity to the energy that I'm giving out. So I think that's how it shows up in a like, if you're trying to identify this in yourself, I think that's how it can feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Dario says that they're holding space almost all the time as a host, right? Mentality. He says holding space generally means being present, attentive, but not interfering, ready to help if asked. Imagine living a whole life holding space for others, right? And so it's like it's like an attentiveness. It's like a readiness to help people if at all possible. And so some of the stereotypes we get around extroverted feeling being like endlessly sacrificing is usually more the holistic version. Now, the analytic version will also make sacrifices, but they're usually making big sacrifices, as you mentioned, as a signal, right, to others, and asking other people to make those sacrifices too. The holistic version isn't asking anybody to do that, right? They're just the ones who are death by a thousand cuts. And so the sensitivity, it means like being particularly tuned into social approval as well. So they don't really like to embarrass anybody or be embarrassed. That's that's a thing that they're going to do everything they can to avoid. They might even be superficially nice sometimes, or read other people as being superficially nice and not knowing whether or not they meant what they actually said. And they can be kind of caught up in lots of little dramas. Whereas analytic, extroverted feeling or harmony, if they're going to be embroiled in drama, it's going to be big drama, right? Like big, massive social scale level drama, perhaps. Like maybe, like as a social justice warrior on social media, right? And being embroiled in all of that. Whereas the holistic extroverted feeling is more going to be like having beefs with people like in their life. It's a little bit more like you mentioned before, like the difference between digital and analog. I think we were talking about it in the thinking functions. This is going to be more of an analog version, and it's going to be more tuned into what's really going on in their lives. So there's beautiful things that come from it. That there's that empathy, the sensitivity, the desire to make sure everybody's okay, the willingness to make little sacrifices. But there also can, like you mentioned, there can be a recipe for resentment, right? And not speaking up for oneself and not handling things, ensuring that there are two-sided relationships, finding themselves in a lot of one-sided relationships, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the solution, as with all of these, has been to merge the energies. And when you get both sides of it, now you get somebody who is willing to stand up for right things, who is willing to be, that analytic side, which is communicating what is acceptable and isn't acceptable, and willing to, make big sacrifices for big things, but also at the same time has a sensitivity and empathy about them to ensure that they're not stepping on toes or bulldozing, not making assumptions, not going, well, everybody just needs to see it from my, I don't think the person would think from my values, but from the values, right? The overarching important values. Well, the more holistic side will give them some sort of discretion around it, more tapping into the energies that are actually at play, being empathetic of a person and what's going on for them in their experience. So if they aren't, can't be corralled, well, what's going on for them as an individual and what's happening? And maybe that's something I should take into consideration and not just assume that they need to be, everybody needs to be on board. It allows for a more individualistic experience of extroverted feeling, more of a relational component, like a person-to-person relational component, as opposed to the abstraction of a person.
Yeah.
And that you just need to get on board.
Is that what you wrote down there? You were going to weave something together later?
Well, and you mentioned signaling, right?
Yeah.
The signaling at the analytic level. I think the holistic level is less about signaling and more about doing, right?
Yeah.
Like they're more going to be active and actually engaged with getting people's needs met as opposed to just conceptualizing it and signaling it.
Yeah, I can think of right now, you know, and maybe a more analytic, extroverted feeling person asserting maybe symbols or imagery or something to communicate an ideal, like a cultural ideal. And maybe another person going and taking action toward that cultural ideal more in a holistic way. Like it's kind of like the signal, the message versus the action. It would be, I don't know. It's like top down, bottom up. It's like you can kind of think of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I have a specific example in mind. I'm not going to share. That's why I kind of like, I started to go down a road. I went, actually, I'm not going to share that. I'm going to divert this. I'm going to use my own extroverted feeling harmony and realize, no, that's probably going to land poorly and go down a different road. So that's kind of why I was like, it looked like I was setting up for something. I'm like, no, I'm abandoned ship. Go this way.
All right.
Never mind.
Fair enough. But I will give a good example in my opinion.
Harmony people terrify me. That's why, because I feel like they're going to come after me. Like it's weird. You know, these so nice, like accommodating, get needs met people. But I feel like that's the mob that's going to come to my house. Of all the energy of the functions.
Well, it's the analytic extroverted feeling or harmony that I think you particularly have been bitten by in the past. Yeah. And as Dario mentions, what if somebody can't be corralled? You know, case in point.
Let's cancel them.
Well, he says that's where maturity comes in. Right. And if they're too one-sided, then that is a problem. And you're, you know, that canceling, quote unquote, canceling. And there's a lot of people who don't even think it's a thing and other people who think it's absolutely a thing. But regardless of whether or not canceling is really a thing, the concept of it.
How can it happens? How could it not be a thing? How's reality not a thing? What are you talking about?
Now people are going to come after you and tell you how it's not a thing. Anyway.
What? Are you serious? People really don't believe this, like reality's happening? I'm sorry. We'll keep going. I'll let them come after me and correct me.
That's right.
In my incorrect viewpoint of what I see as reality. Continue, please.
Well, and that's I'm gonna point to that actually. The mature, you know, perspective on all of this is maybe there's a reason you have a difference of opinions.
Sure.
Right? And case in point with holistic extroverted feeling. That's going to be the version of extroverted feeling that is tuned into the individual experience and goes, well, there's a reason you believe that. And so I'm going to be tuned into that and I'm going to hear it, right? Okay. I'm going to kind of understand like what's going on for you, right? I'm going to be empathetic to your feelings around that. As opposed to the analytic that might come in and argue. But when those two energies are married together, now you have somebody, again, who can tune into the individual and understand individual needs and recognize that, you know, maybe I have to meet people where they're at, right? Maybe I can't just insist on something. I have to meet people where they're at. But then at the same time, has the capacity to stand up for themselves, has the capacity when they truly see things happening that they don't agree with or believe in, that they can go in with a corrective energy, which... I mean, we need shepherding, right?
Oh,
we need leadership in that way. We need to be.
I agree.
We need corrective energy out there. There's plenty of people who need correcting. And so has the capacity to bring corrective energy, but without, I would say probably without making it about their ego, right? Like I'm bringing corrective energy as opposed to going, there's a need here for corrective energy. And I am in a position to be able to bring it. Mm-hmm. And so those two energies together, I think really create a beautiful, like a really altruistic marriage of showing up for people, not just holding space for people in perpetuity forever and always taking the arrows and the hits. That's not healthy, but not always, you know, demanding everybody agree with one's values, right? And that everybody has to get on board and shut up and put up because this is how we solve the world's problems. Right? Yeah. It's like there's like a center point between those two things. And that's when bringing the analytic and holistic together creates that beautiful balance.
Can I save myself some time just to lay one thing down here?
Yeah.
When I say canceling is real, what I mean is there's an attempt by a coalition of people with intent to cancel somebody.
Yes, the intent of canceling.
It doesn't always mean the result is there. Sometimes people are able to escape the attempt to cancel them.
Right.
So I guess that's the argument is like, well, it doesn't actually happen. So it doesn't exist. I'm like, no, it exists. Just because you didn't get the result doesn't mean that wasn't the attempt,
Right.
or what was the play.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that's the frame we're coming from. And if you can tell me that I'm wrong in that, that's fine. But I clearly see that's the attempt. And I wouldn't even know how to argue with somebody that has a different worldview of that, because I'm like, okay, we're not living in the same reality then, which is fine. We don't have to. But I would have no idea how to engage with that material or that argument.
That's a fabulous segue to introverted feeling.
Exactly. I was going to say it because I'm focused on intent. I'm an ENFP, so I'm definitely tuned into that. And whereas an extroverted feeling person might be more focused on the outcome of the intent.
Right.
So canceling doesn't exist because this person clearly didn't get canceled. They were able to escape it. I'm like, that doesn't make that true though. Because the intent was there.
They didn't. It might be because they didn't learn their lesson. So canceling might not be real to people because the discipline didn't actually work.
It didn't work.
So it's not a thing. I don't know. I'm trying to.
That'd be like saying a timeout doesn't exist. That's not, timeouts aren't real because that kid didn't learn their lesson.
Well,
okay.
you're arguing with my interpretation right now,
I'm so
not
sorry.
with other people actually saying this.
Clearly this is an issue in my life I need to sort out, and I'll just get through it. Let's go over to introverted feeling, authenticity. To talk about that. So authenticity, again, is tuned into, in general, the function is tuned into the resonance inside, the motivations, the core values, the intention of action, the impact that we make, and the intention toward that impact. So I think this is where, and by the way, this is a strength or a preferred function for all FPs in the Myers-Briggs system.
Right. It's really I would say its core is self-intimacy, right? It's like, it's a desire to understand, like, not just intentions, but my intentions, right? It's like a very personal experience one has with oneself. And so it's my values, my intentions, my conscience, my perspective built on a lifetime of my lived experience as a person.
Knowing the self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't mean that everybody who uses this function, even as a preferred function, is, really super self-aware. I mean, I can think of people who have this as a first function that lack what I would call self-awareness, but I'm only seeing them in a social context. Right. Like, I don't know what their private thoughts are with themselves. They appear to lack self-awareness because of how they show up, but that's not the same thing. They might actually be quite tapped in to at least how they're feeling about things, minimum how they're feeling. And then the goal, as the function, develops and matures, is to not just know how one feels, but also how that drives them, how that motivates them, and what their likes and dislikes are. Like the things that pull them towards and are attractive, and the things that push them away, and what that says about them. And so it's really about, it's about me, right? And what's going on for me. So there's a more, just like with all the functions, there's a more analytic and a more holistic version. So let's talk about the analytic version of it, introverted feeling. There's the word that, or the name that Dario chose for the analytic version of introverted feeling is the quester. So I find this really interesting that quest is a word that he chose.
By the way, side note, you should join the quest this week. We're launching very shortly to talk about this episode, and then we're going to unpack it. Breakout sessions, journaling, a challenge this week.
Yeah, there's that analytic, extroverted intuition or exploration.
I like this word, quester. It speaks to the program we just launched recently.
It's about pursuing a particular singular life quest or truth, and choices and habits being organized around it.
Yeah.
So just like with the analytic introverted thinking or accuracy, which we talked about in the previous podcast, having like basically a mental model or a model and being very stubborn on those principles around that. This is about having a quest, a purpose. This is the thing that I'm dedicating my life to, and everything else gets organized around it. So there's almost like a missionary feel about it.
Dude, my dad has ISFP preferences. He and my mom started an organization that they literally have the name Crusade in their official name of it. Like back in the 1970s, it was called Christian Youth Crusade. this idea of crusade. I think he's got analytic, introverted feeling or authenticity. And it was always about crusading for God. And it was very single-minded. I mean, he's still single-minded. And I grew up in this environment. It was like, that's what my introverted feeling or authenticity thought you had to do. You had to pick something and be on a mission for it.
Yeah.
And you'll either get there or you'll die trying. I think that's really the energy baked into this.
Well, and their public facing name even has the word quest in it.
Yeah.
Right. And so their official, the name has crusade, and their public facing name has quest.
Yeah.
And so
I never even connected those two until just now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
so they have
Even his organization is a shadow of how analytic his introverted feeling or authenticity is.
right, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I never even put those two together.
Yeah. And actually what's interesting is that there's so much clarity
Mhm.
around the quest or the crusade, usually for people that have analytic. And maybe we should use examples that don't feel so missionary and religious oriented in
Sure.
just a moment. But usually there's so much clarity around that they can score or test as thinking types,
Mhm.
because it doesn't feel emotional. It just feels deep, right? It feels deep, profound, and important.
Well, there's tons of Hollywood actors. Who's the guy? I mean, I'm not going to talk about anything specific that he's focused on driving forward or what he cares about, but I would just say, Sean Penn. I would say Sean Penn. I don't care if he's an introverted feeling or authenticity user. He feels like a person that has analytic, introverted feeling or authenticity. When he has a cause or something he's toward, he's like single-minded, almost to an absurd level. Like he can't let any other information come in. He's just focused on it and like embodies every aspect of it. And he just like lives in this congruent, like I will die or this thing will happen framework.
Yep. Yeah. And
Joan of
actually,
Arc energy, I guess.
yeah, and that consistency of showing up and having everything be filtered through the things that are important to them is one of the symbols of an analytic, introverted feeling or authenticity user.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the symbols of an analytic, extroverted feeling and harmony user too. The analytic types or feeling functions, they tend to have very consistent, I could call them personas, right? Their interface with the outside world. They show up the same in every context or situation because they're standing for these values that are almost outside of themselves, but for introverted feeling feel like themselves. Whereas the holistic versions, and we'll talk about holistic introverted feeling or authenticity in a moment, they're way more flexible. Like holistic extroverted feeling or harmony that we just talked about, it because it's interfacing with the individual and kind of trying to figure out what their needs are, it can almost feel like a chameleon. They can look very different from person to person because they're showing up to meet that person's needs. Whereas the analytic version will show up for the values, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with introverted feeling, because everything is being filtered through, like, are my actions, beliefs, feelings, relationships, habits, and so on all consistent, regardless of what kind of situation I'm in, right? Am I acting 100% consistent, and usually consistent with the thing that I think is important, with my crusade or my quest? And that makes them usually show up the exact same no matter where they go. An example, and I had forgotten that Dario had put this in, so I'm just going to read it because I think it's so good. It might not be somebody who's religious necessarily. It might be, say, a musician. He says, think of an ISFP who is utterly devoted to a singular practice, music. He or she will say, it's all about the music, even though fame, fun, money, and travel are part of the experience too. They believe, maybe fear, that their music will be fake and they will fail if they're not dedicated to a raw honesty.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's all about the music. And if they get at all distracted by anything else, that will take them off of the crusade, right?
It's a great example. Yeah.
So that's not like a mission or a religion or politics or anything. It's just music, but it still has that single-minded focus and trying to honor that,
Yep.
the thing that's so important.
Yep.
So they usually come across as really dedicated. They might be kind of black and white and maybe even judgmental. But they're usually capable of a lot of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are the introverted feeling, like analytic introverted feeling, tends to have more success because they are so driven and because they are so single-minded. And oftentimes single-minded determination is one of the key nodes in the system of success. So these are the types that tend to have a little bit more success in their life.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's talk about the more holistic introverted feeling, authenticity. I think I resonate with this one a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I almost feel bad doing the talking on it because I think, I want to
do it so I can resonate. I want to hear it and resonate as you talk it out. Let's do it.
I want to punt the ball over to you as soon as we describe it. So Dario calls the holistic introverted feeling or authenticity energy the romantic. And he has kind of some flowery language around it. He's like, oh, the romantic, right? He says this person is particularly existential. And I think it's because it is a life of deep, quiet feeling, full of stories and moments and everything having its own beauty and its own sorrow. Like it's a life, it's being tapped into how all of life is making the person feel. That's the really introspective element. When I say that not everybody who has the function is particularly introspective, it's because the analytic version of introverted feeling or authenticity isn't always particularly introspective. It knows it's one thing, or it knows the thing that it's almost like, this is what I was put on earth to do, so I'm going to go do it. The romantic or the holistic version is introspective. It's very connected with all of the experiences and all of the dramas of life and what it tells about the person, or tells oneself about oneself. And I think the major difference here is that there isn't a consistency of showing up. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It almost feels fickle. It feels like every situation is a completely new, it's like a new opportunity for me to show up as a different part of myself. And so instead of having this like rigorous consistency of behavior and values and all that stuff, it actually celebrates the variety. It celebrates all the different aspects and all the different, that this situation brought this out in me and this situation brought this out in me. And so there's a complexity of engagement and interaction, and there might not be a consistent persona, right? There might be, like, again, a more chameleon-like presence.
Yeah. This trips you up when you're running a business, by the way, and you're more invested in the success of people that come and work with you, and you're trying to find a win-win. I'm not speaking from personal experience at all. You're seeing this person, you're saying, well, I can't just have them work with us and help build what we're doing. We also have to make sure we match and make sure they're getting just as much value for their own life or whatever they're interested in too. It has to be a perfect win-win. The challenge is that's diffused energy then. It doesn't capture the value and how building towards something. You end up working on behalf of all these other satellite energies all the time, and nothing ever really gets accomplished, in that energy. So you have to really work hard to not continue to send that energy out and bring it in-house from a business standpoint.
Yeah, it's hard to get traction.
Personal experience.
Right.
That's something you have to overcome.
When everybody is being honored equally in every capacity, including all the different parts of yourself and all the different parts of everybody else, that is very diffused energy.
It's very inefficient. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
It's the most inefficient thing ever.
Yep. And there's all these different voices and feelings that come up every day. And the holistic version says, I'm just going to be, right? I'm just going to roll with it. And so there's not a lot of opportunity for traction there if you're just rolling with everything all the time. Dario mentions that this person might have many soft quests, multiple soft quests, a lot of fingers and a lot of different pies, and subtly diverse identities, even within a single relationship, right? That also makes me think of you.
Yeah. I think I definitely have a holistic version of this, of authenticity. And I resonate with it deeply, and pretty much everything you've said so far.
Yeah. So there's a lot of beautiful things here. There's a lot of understanding different feelings and making room for them. Emotional processing is a little easier. I think that's the holistic version of introverted feeling or authenticity that is more in touch with emotional processing and release and that sort of thing, as opposed to the analytic that might bottle it up, right? Or might try to use it in behalf of the crusade. This is the one that's more in touch with feelings on an individual, deep personal level. But as you can imagine, this can also be a bit of a wishy-washy person.
Yeah.
Right? There's no real strong roots, or not roots. It's like there's no ballast, I guess. And if you're so many different things, so at many times of the day, like how do you build on that?
Yeah.
I don't, this thing made me feel this way, so I guess I'm not going to do that anymore. Even though
Yeah.
it made me feel differently yesterday, I'm not going to do it today. Well, it's like, how do you, I mean, at the worst, it's absolute worst, how do you hold down a job then? Right.
Yeah.
So it's the opposite of successful.
I can see, so we're going to talk about in a moment here that we all have these energies in us, and we all want to balance out both holistic and analytic. And if I look at my introverted feeling, one of the things that I've been working on for the last 10 years, like a decade, is moving from more of a holistic, receptive, open to more of an assertive, directive, focused energy. And I think the Personality Quest is a perfect example of this. If you listen back to the Personality Hacker podcast, maybe 5 years ago, my statements might be like, if you're interested, you might want to check out and maybe come over, and like all these hedging, phrases, and, only if it's right for you. Just, do what makes sense for you and what feels right for you. It's very open-ended, not very like directive or convicted about it. And now if you listen to my language, I still struggle with that. I still have that kind of framework a lot, but I'm really trying to add in like, hey, I'm getting more assertive. Like, you need to join Personality Quest. They're going to be amazing. You're going to have a great experience. We're on a mission together. We're seeking out a real way of applying personality type in our lives. I'm talking in these terms. I'm bringing more of that assertive energy. And so I'm just reviewing. I'm watching myself try to pull that energy more over to the analytic, because I think it's actually what our team and people in our ecosystem need. Even though it's not naturally in me as much, I can access that and grow and develop it. And I think it's going to serve everybody better. And so I think that gives us this avenue of leaning into the other. I'm trying to give an example of how that might look for somebody.
Yeah.
Regardless of what function you're focused on. I'm just talking about authenticity or introverted feeling right now.
Right.
But it might be a different function for you. But that's how you can start to lean into another part of yourself. And sometimes that can really be a good thing in your life.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I think, we've been talking about your ability to pitch as being more like the analytic, extroverted intuition or exploration. But I do think I do remember you throttling that energy more if it wasn't right for the individual, right? Yeah. And I think now you're going a little bit more like, yeah, it probably would be good for you, right?
Yeah.
Like
I'm asserting things more.
Yeah, a lot more assertive. And I don't think it's the intuition. I think it's the feeling that's becoming more analytic.
Yeah, and I like it. I like developing that part. It feels good. It feels weird at first, but it feels really good to develop that aspect.
Well, I think it's natural to you. I think one of the reasons why, just like I talked about my story, that my introverted thinking or accuracy was the only thing I was allowed to have analytic. But then when I left my religion, I had to go super holistic just to reprogram my mind. And so there's a little bit more of a balance. For you, I think analytic is more natural to you. Like, I think you came out of the hatch more analytic, introverted feeling or authenticity.
But my context.
But the context, like, there was not a lot of room in your family for more than one, and your dad with ISFP preferences got top billing.
Yep. So
you trained yourself into a more holistic version. But I think now that you're entering a more analytic, it's feeling right. Like, it's feeling like, yeah, this is what I need to be doing. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think the learning there is that your context, if you're listening or watching right now, your context might have pushed you to the flavor that maybe isn't naturally wired for you. Like, maybe you lean more toward one side or the other, but your context kind of forced you or shaped you into a certain way of expressing yourself. And then just know that, oh man, there's a whole nother avenue available to you of growth and access.
Yeah. Alternatively, your context may have encouraged you to be very one-sided.
True.
And the thing you do like, and then the same deal though. There's another side here waiting to balance out if you haven't already done that work. I will say, just to wrap up introverted feeling and to talk about it as emerged, like when they're balanced. Dario gives an example of like a writer with introverted feeling preferences that they might, like, if they're holistic, they have no problem writing a bad character, right? Because they understand it. They understand that there's good and bad in everybody, and there's a lot more nuance around that. Whereas the analytic might really struggle to write a bad character because they want all their characters to conform to the thing that they think is important. And when they do write a bad character, it might be somebody who is like a lesson, right? Like an object lesson, like, don't do that thing because see, it'll turn out really bad. So if you're trying to determine which side you have a preference for. Is
Yeah.
it easy to write those kinds of characters and you have no problem dipping into the dark? Or do you have a kind of a hard time dipping into the dark and only want to do that as an object lesson? But the reason why it's so important to merge these is the wishy-washiness of not really having a handle on one's identity. There's a lot of beauty that comes from seeing all that variety and hearing all the voices and understanding that there's a whole council going on and there's lots of different parts of you that have a lot of different agendas. And being in tuned and tapped into that is heightened self-awareness. It really is. It's an understanding. It's an introspective understanding of the reality of what it means to be a person.
Yeah.
So the holistic version of introverted feeling or authenticity, I think taps into the true authenticity, right? Like the true realness of what it's like to be a person. But it needs that analytic version because it also needs to stand for something. It can't just see all of that and go like the holistic versus analytic introverted thinking, right? Or accuracy we talked about in the previous podcast. If you're too holistic, you just have no motivation for anything. You don't care. Everything is just so absurd. So you have to have expertise in something with introverted thinking. With introverted feeling or authenticity, you have to stand for something, right? You have to allow yourself to take a stand on something, even if it's just for yourself, right? And so you're not wishy-washy. You're not just sort of letting the world happen to you over time. That there's a sense of purpose and direction and a sense of campaign and a sense of, a sense of crusade. I'm here to do something. But you don't want to be too one-sided on that side either, because now you're rigid, you're locked in. You actually aren't tapped into your emotional experience. Everything is being corralled and funneled toward this crusade. And that one-sidedness can also have real consequences and problems, right? Like you might be actually doing acts of self-betrayal without even realizing it.
Yeah.
So the merging of the two allows an integrity of self and a tapping into the truth and, sort of the vulnerability of being a person, right? And all of those emotions that are true and real, including the dark parts of the heart. While the analytic part comes in and goes, but I actually do stand for something. I actually am going to get something done. I actually have purpose here. And I'm not going to let anything really stand in my way. I'm going to keep going towards it. And that merging of the two, you can see FP types in particular who have merged that. They're just these beautiful souls that are doing cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of value in balancing that.
So what do you think? You've been listening or watching along with us here. It's been the two of us talking. We don't have a third microphone, but we do want to hear from you. Come over to personalityhacker.com. Under this episode, leave a comment, ask a question, or more importantly, share your story. Stories are compressed experiences. We can see what's going on for you in your life through the stories that you tell us. And not just us, but the community that we've gathered here that listen to this podcast, that are part of the Personality Hacker family, the ethos, the ecosystem. And in fact, to that end, you should also join our Personality Quest program. I know, kind of tongue in cheek, and smirking at me like, come on, Joel, you keep pitching this thing, but I am tapping more into my analytic,
that's right,
introverted feeling authenticity. And I do feel conviction around this. I do think it's an awesome thing. And I think people are going to resonate deeply with it. It may not be for everybody, but I think it's probably for you if you're listening or watching right now. And I think you're going to love coming over and being a part of that. Anyway, come over to personalhacker.com, find out more about quests, find out more how you can leave a comment below this episode. Make your voice heard. Come over and get involved. Make this stuff become real in your life. Not just an academic pursuit, but go connect it in a real way. Make a difference for yourself.
Yeah, I agree. I think what is definitely striking both of our introverted feeling or authenticity, regardless of where it's at, even though mine's a little baby and way, way, way down there, is the importance and I think our repeated insistence.
Oh, yeah.
Not that we can insist on anything, but our repeated reminders to make it alive for you. Like the reason why people are attracted to this content is because I think that we can instinctively feel its power, but the power only works if you start applying it in your life.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I think it's really important to apply, and I think quests are a great starting point.
That's exactly what it is. That's what I'm convicted about.
Yeah.
Is the application.
Yeah.
The real world nature, the analog nature of it, not just the debating and arguing with people online and trolling people in comments and all that BS that we see in whatever topic, fill in the topic.
Yeah.
But connecting something in a real way.
Yeah.
And Quest is just one way to do that. Coming over, making a comment is one way to do that. There's a bunch of ways you can do that, but I am absolutely convicted about making this real for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, and that is very congruent down to the deepest parts of myself.
I concur.
There you go.
My introverted
There you
feeling
go.
of
You're on board
authenticity
too.
is
I
on
love
board.
it. Fist bumps right here. We got it.
We have fist bumps more this podcast series than I think we ever have.
I think it's because we're doing a great job.
Go us.
They're deserved. They're well-deserved fist bumps.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. You may be watching us on YouTube right now. You can subscribe, and hit the bell so that you are made aware of future episodes. We also do a premiere every Sunday. As Joel mentioned, you can join us on the Quest, but we also, at the time of this recording, are premiering the video. So come join us at the premiere, even if you're not in the Quest, but you should be. But even if you're not, you can still watch it live, and we have a little bit of interaction afterwards too. So come do that. We have a book. It's called Personality Hacker. You can get it in all major book retailers. If you have not yet done so, think about picking up a copy. No, my analytic extroverted intuition or exploration says, go get a copy.
There you
It
go.
is fabulous.
Oh, I like that now.
Do you see that?
Drawing this out. Good
Working on
job.
that analytic. And let's see, where am I at in all my little spiel? Did I
Book
hit
copy
everything?
Quest. Yeah, I think you did.
I think I hit
I
everything.
think we're good.
All right, so we can wrap up this 4-part series.
Yeah. Okay. So. Yes.
And the final.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, a pitch for our friend Dario.
Yeah.
Also, go get Decode Your Personality, 64
There you go.
brain-based subtypes to go beyond Myers-Briggs. It is currently at Amazon and Radiance House.
That almost deserves an extra fist bump for getting that in the last minute there. My name. Go ahead.
Let's not be too self-indulgent. We'll do that after.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you in 2 minutes on the Personality Quest or next week on the Personality Hacker Podcast.
Right. So we all come back to the main session here. Just going to let the video end and we'll get started here for our Quest Club call this week. Sure, we're here. All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Quest Club membership call. We're glad you're joining with us. If you're brand new to Quest Club, you're our guest this week. We just finished watching the premiere of the newest Personality Hacker podcast, talking about the 4 different expressions of the 2 feeling functions in the Myers-Briggs system. So extroverted feeling, or harmony, what we nicknamed it, or introverted feeling, authenticity. And we want to spend the rest of this Quest Call membership unpacking some of the ideas, talking a little bit about that, and then having some journal prompts. We've got some journal prompts, and we've got a Quest challenge for you this week to be able to test some of these things in your actual life. And we're also preparing for next week. You're going to want to join us live for Quest Club. You might be one of our profiler training students and be joining us because we're coming live from Orlando, Florida right now. We're running our profiler training event next week. And we're on Sunday, the 19th, 1 week from today. Dr. Dario Nardi is going to be on the main stage. And for our profiler training students that are going to be live here with us in Orlando, and also all of our Quest Club members, we're going to be doing a live session with Dr. Nardi, where he's going to go through actual breath work techniques for us to access and lean into the 4 subtypes for all of our personalities. So I think it's gonna be a really interactive, exciting, virtual dynamic event. I'm excited about it because it's gonna be one of the first times we've done this style of broadcast on the Quest Club. And I'm excited to have everybody live in an actual room broadcasting, but also people that are gonna be joining us on the Quest Club as part of the membership. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do right now for all the Quest Club members that are here on the Zoom call. This is going on live on YouTube as well. We're going to that feed in just a moment. But what we're going to be doing right now is we're going to be going into breakout rooms. I want to give you a prompt to talk with 2 to 3 other people, 3 or 4 other people in those breakout rooms about some of the things we talked about on the episode today. Because I think it's really important that we talk with each other. Everybody gets to lean in, open up your energy, and share and communicate with other fellow members of Quest Club.
Yep. So I don't know if those of you in Quest saw me write it in the chat so that you know what the prompt is for this week, but we'll be discussing in the breakout an exercise we gave the last Quest. It was the Quest challenge for the week. And if this is the first time you're in Quest Club, and you didn't get an opportunity to do the challenge, just reflect on what you think it would have been had you been able to do the challenge. And that was the challenge for the week, for those of you who were here last week, was identify a personal need of yours going unmet and communicate that to someone. And the point of that was to kind of feel what that feels like. Are you able to bring other people in to assist when you are experiencing unmet needs, or is that something you feel really weird about? And asking for assistance is a challenge for you. And if you did do that challenge, how did that turn out? That was the first half of the challenge. The second half was identify a desire you have and list out the life benefits of getting that desire met. So what if you actually went for the things you want, right? What if you knew what you wanted and gave yourself permission to go for them? How would your life be different? So for those of you who actually did the challenge, because you were here last week, awesome. We're going to talk about what came up for you this week as you were implementing. And for those of you who this is your first Quest Club conversation, just kind of ruminate, like, what do you think would be the case? Do you give yourself permission to express unmet needs to others and have them help you out? How does that feel? Like, does it feel really weird? Does it make you feel like you're vulnerable to others? Or are you able to bring other people in when you are addressing those needs? And what do you want in life? What are your desires? Are you able to express them? And are you able to give yourself permission to think about how improved your life would be if you went for your desires? Like, how does that make you feel? So those are the two halves of the conversation that we'll be having in the breakout room. We've already created those breakout rooms to give about 15 minutes, right, to have those conversations. So we'll have you all talk for about 15 minutes about communicating unmet needs and permission to have those desires and how your life would improve if you went for what you want. Okay. Yeah. And those are both in the chat room if you need to copy paste it to remind yourself.
Yeah. All right. So what's going to happen is we're going to open up those rooms now. If you've never been part of this before, because we've got a bunch of new people here on Quest Club this week, make sure you accept the request to go into those breakout rooms, talk with your fellow Quest Club members. We'll see everybody back here in 15 minutes to unpack some of this learning, talk about what our quest is for the coming week, and discuss some of the things that we can apply to our lives. All right. We'll see everybody back here in 15 minutes. All right. As our Quest Club members are going into their breakout rooms to discuss this, just want to address people here in the live stream. If you're just joining us here on YouTube, we're in the middle of our Personality Quest Club. This is a brand new membership program we have here at Personality Hacker, which every week we come together and we share some ideas, and then we start to watch the podcast for the week from Personality Hacker. And what happens right after that is we come back as a collective and we go into breakout rooms. We discuss what happened on that podcast, some of the learning, some of the takeaway, finding ways to apply some of these principles to our real life, not just talk about them in theory or understand them. You know, this one thing, like, do you want to understand your problem in life, or do you want to actually solve your problems in life? And a lot of people, I think, go down the road of, well, if I can just understand more of my problem, that's going to fix it. And our thought is, that's not really actually going to move the needle in your life. That doesn't solve anything, just understanding it. That can be really great to understand. Diagnostic can be really good. We do a lot of diagnostic with our coaching clients and things we do here at Personality Hacker. But tuning into, can I actually make a real change? We believe that true learning, if you really learn something, you're going to have behavior change in your life. You're going to change something about the way you do your life, the way you go through life, the way you access people, the way you talk to people, your career changes, relationship changes. It's going to have meaning to you. And so that's what we're really looking for on these Quest calls, this Quest Club on Sundays, is what can we do to apply this to our actual real lives? And then we also have calls different times of the month that we can connect and go deeper. Like we just had a deep dive call this past Thursday where the whole group got together and we're able to go deeper into some of the concepts around the 3 centers of intelligence in the Enneagram. Our colleague and Quest Club host, Christian Rivera, led us through that. We had a really great discussion just a few days ago. And next week, we're going to have Dr. Nardi, by the way, on the main stage here in Orlando, Florida, because that's where we are right now broadcasting. We're going to be here for our Profiler training event all week long on Sunday, November 19th, for Quest Club members only. We're going to be on this live stream, and then we're going to go live to the main stage. We're going to cut the live stream feed, and it's only going to be for Quest Club members to go through the 4 breathwork techniques that move us into the 4 different subtypes of personality. You're going to want to be part of this. You want to join that experience. You can find out more and sign up for Quest Club at personalityhacker.com/Quest, QUEST.
Yeah. I think that this series has, for at least myself, as a person who, as you mentioned, diagnostic is good, right? A good prescription comes from a good diagnostic, but at the end of the day, you can talk about, ruminate over, dissect, deconstruct, and memorize and understand absolutely every tiny little component of every type-based system that is out there. But until you get it to implementation, until you actually start to observe how these things play out in your life, until it starts improving your relationships, your relationship with yourself, relationship with other people, relationship to career, relationship to everything in the outside world, there's always this thing that there's something missing, right? It's like I think we become attracted to these systems because we instinctively know that there's power here. And if we don't implement, what ends up happening is that we become like, our appetite for the system at every tiny little detailed nuance becomes insatiable, because it's actually that's not the nutrient we're seeking. We think it's almost kind of like consuming food. If we're seeking a specific nutrient, we'll over consume foods that do not have that nutrient, right? Like if your body needs protein, until you eat protein, you're just going to keep eating snacks. And you'll never sate your appetite. And I think what happens with typology systems is that we know that there's protein here, but the protein only really nourishes our soul, helps us understand our identity in true fashion when we start to implement, when we start to actually apply what we're learning and make changes based on what we're learning. And otherwise, if we don't start to do that, because that's the protein of the system, if we don't do that, we have this voracious appetite for everything that has to do with the system, and it's never sated because we're never actually getting the nutrient we're seeking. So the Quest Club membership and basically everything that Personality Hacker does is a reminder to get to step in, to implement, to actually experience the protein of the system. And Quest Club is designed to make it much easier to get into application. And so I think that's I particularly after this 4-part series on analytical versus holistic functions, I think the number one thing I went away with is the idea that I am almost entirely holistic, like in every possible way. I think I talked about it throughout the entire podcast series. It's like, I'm way too holistic, and I need to get over into the analytical part. And we were realizing that you're very analytical and you need to get over into the holistic part. And what I thought was really fascinating is we just recently had a conversation. I'm going to call it a conversation, but it was probably actually more of a fight. If I'm being generous, I call it a conversation.
Vigorous disagreement.
A passionate explosion of personalities, where I realized I was trying to be more analytical and you were trying to be more holistic. And it was almost like, it was weird. It was like weird for us to be developing the other side. And I don't know if it was like we're stepping on each other's turf, or if we were just not used to experiencing each other that way, but it was hard to give the other person space to explore that other side without us getting salty. It was almost like we were the muscles that were pushing the spine back out of alignment. And I went, this is why it's so hard to apply this. It's so hard to apply it because our environments are used to us showing up as we already have been showing up. And so if we start to lean into that other energy that balances us out, the environment itself might actually try to discourage it, because they're like, no, you're not allowed to change. And that's like, I watched it happen with us. And we're the people who are constantly and perpetually saying that we need to create space for the other person to change. So I'm like, that's a fascinating piece of information. So if you do start to develop the other side, and of course in Quest, we're going to talk about ways to do that. But if you do, as just a person who has watched this podcast series, if you do try to develop the other side, watch out for environmental factors that are like, that's weird. I'm not used to experiencing you that way. Please stop doing that. You might have to like push through and go, no, I'm allowed to be this other thing. I'm allowed to also explore this other side of me. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. The other thing too, the thing about application, I'm realizing we didn't even talk about this, but if you're interested, if you're watching right now on the live stream or even watching back the recording, and you're interested in these things, talking about application, Quest Club is fantastic. You should definitely join our Quest Club. Come and join us every Sunday and be part of this. You can come next week on the 19th and see Dario do the breathwork stuff. But actually, I would say if you're really interested in applying this, you should consider joining our Profiler training program. It's a 6-month course. In fact, we're going to open up enrollment in probably 2 weeks. I think right after American Thanksgiving, we're going to open up enrollment for this. And we're going to be forming a new class of probably 40 to 60 students that are coming together from all over the world to learn the art and science of personality profiling. And it's a little different than typing. Typing is watching videos or looking at people, celebrities online, or kind of observing things from a distance. It's one-sided. And it can be fun. It's a great way. A lot of people start with typing. They start watching characters on TV and they make some speculation. They talk about it. And it's very systems and theory heavy. And you only have one side of the equation. Well, with personality profiling, the idea is that you actually have a live person that you're having a conversation with. And so as you're helping determine their best fit type through the profiling process, you're able to ask questions. You're able to see what they're confused about. You're able to ask the why behind questions. Like somebody, you say, what do you love to do? A lot of people might say something like gardening. Well, why do you like gardening? Because there's different reasons. Every single type might say gardening in some scenario, but why gardening? Is it because you like your hands in the dirt and the sensory experience of it? Is it because you commune with the plants? So it's more intuitive and it's mad, you're tending the plants, they give you messages. Is it because you are growing food and it's very practical for you, in your family, and you like to can your food and all of that? Like there's a bunch of reasons somebody might do gardening. So just the answer of the thing they're doing, a lot of people there when they're typing online are like, oh, well, they're this personality type. It's like, done. Well, you don't know the reasons behind why they're doing what they're doing. And profiling allows you to tune into that. And we have an entire methodology. We spend 6 months teaching, and then we come together at a 5-day live event, which is happening right now, like starting this week coming up. We're going to be working with students to take all the learning they've done virtually in a live dynamic experience. We're setting everybody up with practical ways to test this. And then at the end of the week, this coming Saturday, they're going to actually be able to, on Zoom, do a live profiling session with a volunteer for the first time. So if they haven't been able to do one during that 6 months already. So profiler training is an incredible program. There's a plug back over here if you're looking for one. Your computer battery's going down. Profiler training is an incredible program. And, if you're really interested in applying this in a practical way, if you're a person that likes to help other people, if you are the type of person that is a helper, a contributor, somebody that often likes to contribute to others in your world, or you're the person that people come to for advice, you just find yourself being the person in the room that a lot of people ask advice from, advice givers. Or maybe you're doing it professionally, you're a coach, a therapist, somebody that uses an HR in your career. We think that profiler training would probably be right up your alley. You probably love this program because you can apply all the things you love about personality type with a methodology, and also a community of like minds that's doing the same. It's an incredible program. So yeah, if that's something that's really interesting to you, I think that would be something to look for in the next couple of weeks as we open up enrollment.
Yep. It's a boss program.
All right. We got to go, by the way, because our students the Quest Club members are coming back from the breakouts like just a few moments here. And we need to work with them through some journal prompts and then give the Quest exercise this week. Don't forget, next Sunday, you should join us on Quest Club, personality.com/Quest. Dr. Nardi is going to be doing 4 breathwork techniques to move into the 4 different subtypes of dominant, creative, harmonizing, or normalizing. I think I go between dominant and creative as an ENFJ. From some of the breath techniques to lean back more into the harmonizing. In our work we do, our coaching, like our personal life path coaching program and mentorship, I have to be ready to be more receptive. I can't always be aggressive, like, okay, we're doing this and direct traffic. I need to be more in a receptive mode through our coaching. And so I'm really eager to learn from Dario a little bit more of the breath techniques to be able to shift and move into these energies. I think it's going to show up in my coaching and ability to give. And I think you'd really benefit from it too, especially again, if you're one of those advice giver type people, you find yourself giving advice, being able to move into different energies is probably very powerful.
Yeah.
So, all right, we got to go. We'll see you next week on Quest Club, the 19th of November. It's starting up at 11:45 Eastern time, AM. And we'll do the live stream, and then we're going to roll right into Dr. Nardi's stuff right after that.
So let's see if we do this well, because our entire team is traveling to Orlando, Florida right now for a 5-day live event, profiler training live event. And that means that we're figuring out all the tech all by ourselves, and we haven't done this by ourselves yet. So let's see if we can seamlessly end the live.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
All right. Well, Joel Mark, Witt, Antonia Dodds, personality signing off for Quest Club this week. We'll see you next week. You want to join us, you can still do it. And we'll see you inside the club or next week on the live stream.
Okay.
Peace.